Going on up into the standard, even the professional and the mockup area. I'm going to be showing you those capabilities next. Kind of getting into the 3D markup, the 2D, the 3D compare, show you how we handle assembly data inside them and mark it up too, which is the important thing. But now we're starting to move into some of the other packages. So if you have Base and you're trying this out and you find out that some of the things I'm doing now didn't work, well, I think it's going to be a limitation of your license at this point. If I take a look, say even this part right here, so say I want to go ahead, start with the yoke, this little yoke example here. There's a change that's being proposed. Hey, I need to move this up 15 millimeters. How do I communicate that with the rest of my team? If I load up the actual, the JT file, the 3D file, I can view this in here, and I want to go ahead and add my ideas to that. I can go ahead and by using my, I got my 3D markup capabilities turned on, so that gives me this menu bar here. If you can't see it, you just have to right click and turn it on. I have my 3D navigation over here, which allows me to zoom in, zoom, pan, rotate, auto scale, things like that. So if I wanted to communicate this information to, hey, maybe we ought to move this up and give somebody else a better idea than just then going to the drawing, find a drawing, can't sketch that. I can actually apply the same notes over here on this end. So say, I wanted to go ahead and highlight this area. I can, show where I want to put the emphasis of my note over here. So simply by just manipulating some of the properties, we want to focus in on this area here and say I want to go ahead and, possibly, hey, check to see if we can move this hole if it's possible. If I want to get, say I want to introduce a change order notice or change order review, something like that. Just either this could be a command to change, review this change, or hey, make this change possible. Or hey, do we want to make this change? Do we want to contemplate this change? What's going to affect? Because it just doesn't affect this one part. This is also part of a, if this is a piece part, there's always an assembly is attached with it. So quickly, just using some of the tools here, I did a freehand circle, called it out, made a note. I have some other tools. I have some freehand, if you want to freehand any illustration. So basically what you would redline on a print or a picture, I'm doing this all within the context of the database. And then once I'm done, making my changes and I've kind of, I've communicated what I need to do, I can go ahead and just save this out into the actual environment. I get a separate data set that's attached to my JT file. So now I've got my data. It's still hooked into my product component. So if anybody does a search now, if they go and look for this particular yoke, they can still identify and view. Let's bounce out of it real quick. Let's reset there we go. They can still view the original JT file, but then they can also come in and take a look. And I have the capability of, hey, look, there's this part right here. If I wanted to capture the view, I have different tools where I can go ahead and, hey, capture particular view. If I wanted to, automatically come back to it and, reset the 3D motion on it, I can. Let's go ahead and save that out. But I've got the data that's already, okay, I've got the information here. Now, how do I can go about disseminating this information out? Well, a couple of ways I can do that. Let me switch over back. I can send this off, much of the same way I got the field report. I can send this off to a colleague. I can send this off to somebody, send them the actual item rev that has all the components in there as necessary, or I can just send off the actual, say, markup. Send this off to somebody in the organization. Tell them, hey, take a look at this markup. Say markup change for yoke. And I could just send them the actual, send them a note. Send him the attachment that would show up in his mailbox. and he'd be able to go ahead and review the markup data much like I did. The other way we can do is we can submit to workflow. We can submit the entire thing to a workflow, and then, if we need be, the workflow, and I'll show you that here in the next example, but whatever we do in the workflow, he still has a opportunity and the ability to view that data. So going now into, let's go ahead and take a look at, I've got dump truck here, and I've got the, say I come over here and take a look at the PDF. I showed you a 3D, that would be a 3D markup. If I'm going to do a 2D markup, much the same way, I come in here and activate the 2D markup side, the 2D markup components, and say I wanted to highlight a couple areas here on this draft. I got a exploded view, of course. I can go in here, add some text, much like I did on the other one. And here I want to make a note, change the basket out. Give me a larger, can't type this morning. Give me a larger version of the basket. And of course you have font control and everything else. We can go ahead and make that smaller. But give me a larger change. I can go ahead and communicate that back and forth to the team. Save this as an individual markup layer. It would show up directly underneath the in this case the PDF. So the PDF is still intact. If I go back and take a look at the actual PDF, it's still there. And then my markup layer is underneath. So I still retain the original piece of information, just I'm slapping another layer of I'm slapping a layer on top of it. It's almost like Photoshop, creating a new data set that slaps a new layer of information on top of that. So in this case, I would go ahead and say, need to communicate that change to somebody else. Instead of sending them an envelope, or if there was a more formal piece, if I add more data to this, I could simply just submit this into a workflow and say, I want to do a change review on this object here. And when I do that, I can send the entire packet. So this entire, say, item revision with all the information, I can send that all together to the next person to get released out. So in this case, it's going to go to a change review. And just for the sake of, send it over to myself. So in this instance, if I want to do a quick review of it, say, hey, is it possible to go ahead and change this? Make the change to this as the person gets his, gets an email, say, hey, man, you got a task. If we want to make this quick review, he can simply go in there and read the instructions that are associated with it, but also interrogate all the targets that came along with it. So in this case, there's the note, hey, we need to change and make a larger version of this basket. If I approve it, we can send it through the approval process and get a sign off, and then proceed on the changes and making, the basket actually larger. If you wanted to go one step above that and say we wanted to, instead of just adding the 2D version, say we wanted to go ahead and add, say we want to go ahead and do a markup on the entire thing. So instead of just marking up the actual print side, wrong one. So if I can do what I can do is I can send this off to one of my other visualization tools, and I can pull the entire assembly in. So much like I did with the 3D part, I can mark up my 3D assembly as well. So in this instance, I can come over here and activate my 3D markup again. In this instance, say I wanted to convey a little more detail on a 3D part. Hey, I'd go ahead and change. We need a larger basket. So instead of just doing it on a single component, I can now pull it in on the assembly side, go in here and capture my view. That way it always comes up to this point here, and I can save this out. And we'll just call this, just for identification purposes, I'll keep my username in there and everything else. Again, I can save this off as a separate data set. So if I ever need to, say I wanted to go ahead and include an extra piece of information into the workflow, say there's some more reference materials I wanted to throw in, if I take a look, I can send this markup, which consisted of, if I send this back over to the workflow viewer, or lifecycle viewer, my bad, and apply my view, I can go ahead and, if it's being sent off to the next person, apply my view. There's, these are the changes I'm proposing. Those are built into the actual system. So if I wanted to attach this, say I wanted to attach this to my work list, I could go ahead and add it into my references, and this would then follow that piece of information. So not only do I have, a 2D markup of the actual print itself, but I also now have an assembly markup. We can turn it around. We can do some extra. We could do an animated process too within that lifecycle viewer, but the lifecycle visualization, that lifecycle viewer, and we could incorporate more information into this engineering change order. So again, all this is in the context of say the database. So as I look, I can find that information if I need to. That progress, if it progresses forward and we go ahead and make the change, I say I have I got the basket sitting. If I go ahead and make the basket larger, say I started off with with this one here, we went ahead and proceeded with the change. I ended up with a basket that looks like this. Visually can't really tell the difference. But if I send, if I utilize, after we make the change in the digital markup, if those were all went properly and the person actually made the change to the actual components, we can then bring them into, say, something that looks like this and actually do a do a 2D compare, 3D compare of the actual objects. That way we can see, hey, well, what's the main difference between, basket 1 and basket 2? We can go in there and take a look. Okay, yeah, it's a little larger, not by much, but it's a little larger. We can do a quick compare. We also note that the actual Lego pieces did move a little bit, so possible, conflict if we want to keep a uniform Lego piece structure. That way the other Lego pieces actually attached to. We can build off of this, but we can quickly, say we convey that information through the markup. We did the actual change and everything, then going back to the actual lifecycle visualization tools and going into the lifecycle viewer, we can do a 3D compare of this. And this is what some of the professional and the mockup capabilities of the extension of the license actually give you the ability to do. We can also go ahead and take snapshots of this. Again, we can also do, manipulate constraints, but you get much more features coming out of the higher level packages than you would just do out of the base version. We wouldn't be able to do some of this more advanced stuff. Also, if we take a look at the what else changed besides the, if we made the change to the bucket, the drawing must have changed. If we have 2 versions of the drawing, we have an A version and a B version. Say we take the 2 PDFs that were generated and we send that to the lifecycle viewer, we can do a compare on those as well. So not only on the actual 3D component side, but say we wanted to compare both of the prints, the closer explorative view change because we probably made a new one, but even if we zoom in closer to the actual assembly, we can see that the one in the basket's just a little larger, but there's also 2 tow hooks that were added into the piece. So if we take a look at the actual assembly at this point, like, hey, well, the information that was primarily conveyed through the markup side, gives us the ability, if we follow that through, it's all self-contained, and if we need to, go back and take a look, we can still use all the tools available to us to make sure, one, verify that the change was made, but we can also go back and take a look at, what kicked off if you're doing engineering change orders, what kicked off the change to add the tow hooks or to make the basket larger, where was that documented at, who signed off on it, why was it made, why things happened the way they happened. We can go back to our process history on any one of these, take a look and see who who initiated the review, why it was, initiated out, what part was, what kicked it off, what any data that was added to it. And once you use the visualization tools, and you have this data within the database, it's here for future reference and for future use. So as you start using, of course, if you want to start getting into this or have any other questions, or want to get in contact with us, we'll give you some of the information later on once I wrap up. But basic functionality of visualization and mockups gives you within Teamcenter is that you stay within the system. You stay within the managed environment. The data never leaves. You can quickly associate and make reference to it within a workflow over here, or as simply as communicating, a simple email to somebody. But the information stays within Teamcenter, nothing leaves, and you cut down on your need for physical, say if it paper, external pictures flying around in the email. If need be, you can just send a note through and tell somebody, hey, log into Teamcenter, I've got a change. Do you think we should go ahead and make that change? And it gets saved as the life cycle of that part progresses forward. So at any time you need to do an audit, you can quickly go back and there's all the information that you actually need.